Vanessa Calloway flung a rusted car key across the sunlit terrace. It cracked against marble and skidded to the shoes of Marcus Webb, her late father's black groundskeeper turned mechanic, still in his work coveralls, still holding a chamois cloth like he hadn't gotten the message. 200 guests watching. "Daddy loved you so much," she said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Here's his parting gift, a rusted piece of junk for his favorite garage rat. Your severance, sweetheart. Now get off my property." Marcus's throat tightened, his eyes stung. 22 years. And this was how it ended. He crouched, picked up the key. The same hands that had changed Weston Calloway's oxygen tank through his last winter wrapped around cold metal. His jaw locked. He stood, pocketed the key, and walked off that terrace without turning back. Vanessa watched him go, smirking, already reaching for her champagne. She had no idea she'd just given away the one thing that could take everything from her. Wait. Before you judge this man, you need to hear where those hands learned to work. Marcus Webb didn't go home that night. He didn't have one anymore. He sat in the driver's seat of a rusted-out Shell parked behind the Calloway Estates service lot, the key still in his pocket, his single duffel bag on the passenger seat. The vinyl beneath him was cracked and sun-bleached. The dashboard wore a film of dust so thick it looked like frost. The windshield had a spider crack running corner to corner, splitting the moonlight in two. He didn't turn the engine. Didn't try. Just sat there in the dark, breathing in old metal and dried oil, and let himself remember. Gary, Indiana. Marcus was 7 years old the first time his grandfather put a socket wrench in his hand. Silas Webb's garage sat at the dead end of a street lined with shuttered steel mill houses, a corrugated tin roof, a cracked concrete floor, and more knowledge packed inside those walls than most universities could dream of. A hand-painted sign above the door read Webb and Grandson. Foreign car restoration since 1958. There was no son. Silas's only boy had died at the mill in a crane accident, so he poured everything into his grandson instead. "You don't look at a car, Marcus." Silas's voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that made you stop fidgeting. "You listen to it. You feel it. It remembers everything. Every hand that touched it, every road it traveled, every wreck it survived. Their job is to hear what it's trying to tell you." By 9, Marcus could identify a car's make and decade by the sound of its idle alone. By 11, he could strip a 4-speed gearbox and rebuild it blindfolded. By 14, he'd memorized every European coach-built car produced between 1935 and 1965. The Voss Bellamy Type X, the Delacroix A12 Competizione, the Rendell Speedster, the Harwick E-Type rival nobody remembered anymore. He knew their production runs, their serial formats, their factory colors, their weak points. Silas didn't just teach him mechanics. He taught him how to see value where the rest of the world saw scrap. "People throw things away because they don't understand them," Silas told him once, wiping his hands on a rag that was never fully clean. "Cars, neighborhoods, people, especially people who look like us. But everything has a story underneath, if you're patient enough to scrape off the dirt." The garage closed in 19. Silas couldn't keep up with rent after the mill shut down and the block emptied out. He sold his tools one by one, each sale carving a piece out of him. There was nothing left but the sign above the door and the old ledger book where he'd written every restoration formula he'd ever invented. Paint mixtures, metal treatments, upholstery stitching passed down from an Italian coach builder he'd apprenticed under in the 1950s. He handed the ledger to Marcus on a Sunday afternoon. "This is worth more than anything in this building," he said. "Don't lose it." Silas died 4 months later. A stroke, alone in the empty garage. Marcus was 20. No money, no degree, no connections. The ledger went into his duffel bag, and the duffel bag followed him from job to job. Dishwasher, forklift operator, night shift security. Until he landed at the Calloway estate in 2002. 22 years he mowed lawns, trimmed hedges, swept the equipment barn, cleared brush at 5 a.m. before anyone else woke. He was invisible, a pair of work gloves and a name nobody bothered to learn. But Weston Calloway saw something else. It started by accident. Marcus was clearing the drainage ditch behind the equipment barn one evening when he heard the old man cursing at a 1962 Roadster that wouldn't turn over. Marcus listened to the starter grind twice, walked over, and said, "Carburetor's flooded. Give it 10 minutes and don't touch the pedal." Weston stared at him like he'd spoken another language. It started on the 11th minute. After that, they talked every week, sometimes for hours. Weston would pour 2 glasses of Kentucky bourbon, one for himself, one for Marcus. and they'd sit in the equipment barn surrounded by 9 vintage cars worth more than most neighborhoods. "You know more about these machines than any engineer I've ever hired," Weston told him once, shaking his head. "How the hell did you end up cutting my grass?" Marcus smiled. "Somebody had to, sir." Weston never told his daughter about those conversations. He knew exactly what Vanessa would say. He knew exactly what she thought about the man who cleared her father's gutters. Maybe that's why he left the car to Marcus in his will. Not as a joke. Not as an afterthought. As the one act of respect he could give without his daughter's permission. Marcus sat in the rusted driver's seat, pulled Silas's ledger from the duffel bag, and opened it to a dog-eared page. A pencil sketch of a car. Sleek, low, silver. Underneath, in Silas's careful hand. 1957. Voss Bellamy Type X, Silver Falcon Sport Coupe. Only 3 built. Marcus looked up at the cracked windshield, then down at the key in his hand, then back at the sketch. His hands were shaking. This time it wasn't from grief, but before the key. Before the terrace. Before the laughter and the champagne and the 200 witnesses. There were the 3 weeks that broke Marcus Webb in ways nobody ever saw. Strike 1. 5 days after Weston Calloway's funeral, Vanessa called a staff meeting in the main foyer. All 26 employees, housekeepers, groundskeepers, kitchen staff, drivers, lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. Vanessa stood at the top of the staircase, arms crossed, phone in one hand. "New rules," she said. "No greeting, no preamble. My father ran this estate like a shelter. That's done." Her eyes found Marcus in the back row. "You, Webb, step forward." Marcus stepped forward. 25 pairs of eyes followed him. "My father had a strange habit," Vanessa said, voice carrying across the marble. "He let the grounds crew wander into his private barn, sit in his study, drink his bourbon." She let it land. A few staff shifted uncomfortably. "That's over. Effective immediately, you're restricted to the equipment shed, the tool room, and the outer fence line. No barn, no main house after 6 p.m. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm not finished." Vanessa descended 2 steps. "You've been listed as head groundskeeper for 12 years. I looked at the books. A landscaper making supervisor pay." She laughed, short, sharp, rehearsed. "Starting today, your title is grounds labor. Your responsibilities are the fence line, the drainage, and the trash pickup. Your salary is adjusted accordingly. 35% cut." A sharp breath rippled through the line. Marcus's chest hollowed. 35%. That was his rent, his groceries, his mother's medication. "Any questions?" Vanessa asked. For half a second, Marcus almost said it. Almost told her that her father had promoted him personally, that they'd spent hundreds of hours in that barn together, that Weston had trusted him with machines worth more than some of the staff would earn in a lifetime. Instead, he swallowed it, like he'd been swallowing things his whole life. "No, ma'am," Vanessa smiled. "Good." She turned and walked back up the staircase. Her heels clicked against marble like a countdown. Strike 2. 2 weeks later, to terrace luncheon. This one was performance. Vanessa had invited 35 guests. Old money wives, a congressman's daughter, white tablecloths, crystal decanters, a jazz trio under a cloudless sky. Marcus was clearing dishes from the east table when Vanessa's voice cut through the music. Marcus, who set the plates down, walked toward her table. Every guest turned. Vanessa was seated between Trent Ashby and his wife, a thin woman with pearl earrings and a purchased smile. "My guests were just asking about my father's staff," Vanessa said, swirling a glass of rosé. "And I was telling them how Daddy used to let his groundskeeper sit in the barn and pretend to be a mechanic." She tilted her head. "Tell them, Marcus. Tell them about your little hobby." Silence. The trio had stopped. "I used to help Mr. Calloway with his cars, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "Help?" She repeated the word like it tasted funny. She turned to Trent. "He helped," meaning he wiped the dust off the hoods and Daddy let him think he was useful. Back to Marcus. "You can go now, and take the plates with you. That's what you're actually good at." Trent raised his glass. To the help. Laughter, full-bodied, sun-drenched laughter, the kind that echoes off stone walls and follows you into your sleep. Marcus picked up the plates and walked back toward the kitchen, fingers white around the porcelain. Behind him, he heard Vanessa say to her guests, "Honestly, I don't know why Daddy kept him around so long. Probably felt sorry for him. You feed a stray once, it never leaves." Marcus kept walking, his vision blurred, but his feet kept moving. Strike 3. The morning of the terrace party. The day everything changed. Marcus arrived at 5 a.m. as he always did, unlocked the equipment shed, pulled on his gloves, started clearing the drainage line. At 7:15, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. "Miss Calloway wants to see you," one said. They escorted him. Escorted, like he was a threat, to what used to be Weston's study. The bookshelves were gone. The oil painting of Weston's father was gone, replaced with a mirror. Vanessa sat behind the desk, legs crossed, phone recording. "Marcus." She didn't look up. "I've been thinking. My father left a few things in his will I've been sorting through. One of them is that disgusting rust bucket behind the equipment barn." She wrinkled her nose. "Nobody wants it. The scrapyard won't even take it. Says it's not worth the tow." She finally looked up, smiled. "Oh, I thought, why not give it to you? A retirement gift from the Calloway family." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I'm not retiring, ma'am." As she stood, smoothed her skirt. "Today's your last day. I want you off the property by tonight. But first." She picked up the rusted key from the desk and rolled it between her fingers like a coin. "Let's make it fun. I'm having guests over this afternoon. Big crowd. I want to give you a proper send-off." She looked at him the way a child looks at a toy she's about to break. "After all," she said, "you've earned it." 6 hours later, she would fling that key across a sunlit terrace in front of 200 people. And Marcus Webb's real life, the one nobody in that house had ever bothered to see, would finally begin. The car looked like something that had crawled into the back lot to die. It sat beneath a rotting tarp, half hidden by overgrown weeds, sinking into mud that had cracked around its tires like old skin. Paint, whatever color it had been, was gone, replaced by a quilt of rust. Brown, orange, black. The front bumper hung at an angle. One headlight was shattered. The driver's mirror was missing entirely. To anyone walking past, it was exactly what Vanessa had called it, a piece of junk. Marcus pulled the tarp off completely. Dust exploded into the afternoon light. He coughed, waved it away, and stood back. For a long time he didn't move, just looked. Not at the rust. Not at the cracked windshield or the flat tires. He looked past all of it, the way his grandfather had taught him to look at things 40 years ago in a tin-roofed garage in Gary. "You don't look at a car, Marcus. You listen to it." He walked to the front, crouched, ran his fingers along the fender line, slow, deliberate, like a blind man reading a face. Beneath the corrosion, the curve was still there. Long, sweeping. A slope that didn't belong to any American car ever built. This was European and shaped. His pulse picked up. He moved to the side panel, scraped a thumbnail through the thickest rust near the door hinge. Flakes fell away like dead petals. Underneath, a flash of silver. Not chrome. Not aftermarket. Factory silver, a shade he'd seen only once before, in a photograph taped to page 31 of Silas Webb's ledger. Over Falcon. Marcus's breath caught. He dropped to his knees, crawled under the car, ignoring the mud soaking through his jeans, found the frame rail, wiped it clean with his rag, pressed his face close enough to smell the iron, amped into the steel, barely legible after 7 decades of neglect. Boss Bellamy Motor Works. Turin Assembly. Chassis 2-3. Marcus backed out from under the car and sat in the mud, staring at nothing. Chassis 2 of 3. 3 ever built, hand-assembled for the factory's own racing division in 1957. Never sold, never meant for the public. One had stayed in the Voss Bellamy Company Museum for decades. The other 2 had vanished in the late 1960s, wiped from every registry, every auction record, every collector's ledger. The car world had assumed they were scrapped. They weren't scrapped. One was sitting in the mud behind a billionaire's estate, wearing 70 years of rust like a disguise. And the only person alive who recognized it was a fired groundskeeper with dirt under his fingernails and a ledger in his duffel bag. Marcus pulled the ledger from the bag with shaking hands. Page 31, soft with age. Silas's pencil sketch. A low, sweeping silhouette with a fastback roofline and a shark-nose grill underneath. If you ever find one, and you won't, you're looking at something priceless. And beneath that, smaller, almost an afterthought. But nobody finds them, Marcus. They find you. He pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled so badly it took 3 tries to dial. "Dale, I need your garage." Ilose, retired mechanic, Marcus's oldest friend, the only person who'd offered him a couch when Vanessa threw him out, answered on the second ring. "Marcus, what's wrong?" You okay? Marcus looked at the car. The sun was setting behind it, turning the rust to something that almost looked like gold. I'm okay, he said. I need you to come here with a trailer tonight. A trailer for what? Marcus closed his eyes. Silas's voice echoed through 40 years of memory. Everything has a story underneath. For a car, Marcus said. The most important thing I'll ever touch. Dale was quiet for 3 seconds. Marcus, you're scaring me. Good, Marcus said. And for the first time in 3 weeks, for the first time since Vanessa Calloway had ripped away everything he'd built, Marcus Webb laughed. Short, rough, almost painful, but real. Dale Osei's garage sat on a gravel lot off Route 12, 14 miles south of the Calloway estate. 2 bay doors, cinder block walls, a busted Pepsi sign hanging crooked over the entrance, and enough spider webs to knit a blanket. But it had a lift. It had light. It had a lock. That was all Marcus needed. The trailer arrived at midnight. Marcus had covered the car in moving blankets and trash bags taped at the seams. They winched it off together in silence, waiting under a sky full of stars, neither of them fully believing what was sitting on the garage floor when the blankets came off. Dale circled the car 3 times, didn't touch it. On the 3rd pass he stopped, hands on his knees. Marcus, if this is what you think it is. It is, Marcus said. That's why I called you. They started at 6 a.m. the next morning. Marcus didn't rush. He'd waited his whole life for this. Silas's ledger sat open on a metal stool beside him. The Bible, Dale called it, and Marcus followed it like scripture. Days 1 through 6, assessment. Marcus documented every inch, photographed the corrosion patterns, not to remove them but to understand them. Rust tells a story. Where water pooled, how long the car had sat. He mapped it like a surgeon mapping damage, deciding what could be saved and what needed careful surgical replacement. The frame was solid. That was the miracle. Voss Bellamy had built the Silver Falcon's chassis from an aircraft-grade alloy meant for endurance racing. It was built to survive Le Mans. Surviving a back lot in Connecticut was nothing. Days 7 through 28. The engine. Marcus pulled the inline 6, laid each component on a clean sheet on the garage floor. Pistons, camshaft, the mechanical fuel injection assembly. They cleaned each part by hand. No power tools, no shortcuts. Machines could scratch original surfaces, and original surfaces were where the value lived. Each injector nozzle had been hand-calibrated at the Turin factory in 1957. Marcus cleaned them with a toothbrush and mineral spirits under a magnifying lamp Dale had bought at a flea market for $8. You're out of your mind, Dale said, watching him spend 3 hours on a single nozzle. My grandfather once spent 5 days on one carburetor from a 1938 Roadster, Marcus said without looking up. Sold the car for 40 grand after. That carburetor was the reason. Days 29 through 58. Bodywork. This was where Marcus's hands became something more than hands. He stripped the rust layer by layer. Chemical bath, fine grit sanding, then hand polishing with steel wool so fine it felt like cloth. Beneath the corrosion, the original panels emerged like bones from a dig site. The silver paint had survived in patches. Marcus mixed a matching batch from scratch using Silas's formula. Aluminum powder, clear lacquer, a binding agent that hadn't been commercially made since the 1970s. He sourced materials from 3 suppliers across 2 states, mixed them in a coffee can, and sprayed them with a gun he calibrated by ear. Dale watched the first coat go on. The silver caught the fluorescent light and threw it back like liquid mercury. Jesus, he whispered. Days 59 through 84, interior and finishing. Marcus restitched the leather seats by hand, 12 hours per seat, replicating the factory stitch pattern from a photograph in a 1958 Voss Bellamy catalog he'd found at a used bookstore for $4. The dash instruments were cleaned, recalibrated, reinstalled. The wooden steering wheel was sanded, oiled, polished until the grain glowed like amber. On the 85th day, Marcus turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. It didn't roar. It sang, a deep resonant hum that filled Dale's garage like a church organ. 67 years of silence breaking open in a single perfect note. Dale stood in the doorway, arms folded, tears running down his face. He didn't bother wiping them. Marcus sat with his hands on the wheel. The leather was warm. The gauges glowed. And for one long, still moment, the garage disappeared. And he was 7 years old again, standing in a tin-roofed shop in Gary, watching his grandfather bring something broken back to life. You see that, Silas? Marcus whispered. We did it. The next morning, Dale called Priya Anand, and everything changed. Priya had spent 29 years at Voss Bellamy Motorworks. She'd started as a junior engineer at the Turin plant, risen to senior technical director of the company's heritage division, and retired in 2020 with a pension, an engraved watch, and the quiet authority that comes from having touched cars most people only read about. She had personally overseen the restoration of 11 museum-grade vehicles. She had authenticated 5 contested classics for a major auction house. She had never, in 29 years, seen a silver falcon outside the company museum. Dale called her on a Wednesday. "Priya, I need you to come look at something." "What kind of something?" "The kind you don't talk about on the phone." Priya drove 4 hours from her home in Pennsylvania. She pulled into Dale's gravel lot at 4 p.m. She stepped out and saw the car through the open garage door. She stopped walking for a full 5 minutes. Her eyes traced the roofline, the fender sweep, the intake behind the door. Her lips moved silently, like a woman reciting a prayer she thought she'd forgotten. Then she walked forward slowly and touched the hood with 2 fingers, the way you'd touch a sleeping child. "Who restored this?" Dale pointed at Marcus, wiping his hands on a rag. Priya looked at him, looked at the car, looked back. "Chassis 2, she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "We thought both surviving prototypes were destroyed. There was a warehouse fire in Turin in 1971. The record said the second one was lost in it. The insurance file was closed 50 years ago." She paused, ran a hand along the door seam. "Where has this been?" "Behind a billionaire's house," Marcus said. "Under a tarp for at least 20 years. Priya crouched, read the chassis stamp twice, stood, took off her glasses, put them back on, read it a 3rd time. "This is real," she said, not to Marcus, not to Dale, to herself. "This is real." She made 3 phone calls. Each lasted less than 2 minutes. Each ended in silence, then the same word. Within 72 hours, the news broke. The first call came from a collector car media outlet with millions of subscribers. Then a major online auction platform, then a classic car house, then CNN, then Reuters, then Bloomberg, then every automotive journalist and museum curator with a phone and a pulse. The headline wrote itself. "Lost 1957. Voss Bellamy Silver Falcon found behind Connecticut estate. Bird by fired groundskeeper." Marcus's face was on every screen. His name, a name that had never appeared in any company directory, any database, was suddenly the most searched name in the collector car world. Reporters camped outside Dale's garage. Marcus refused every interview, every single one. Dale answered the door with the same line each time. "He's working. Come back never." One reporter shouted through the door, "Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb." Elway's video of the party has 30 million views. "Do you have a response?" Silence from inside. Dale leaned out. "His response is the car. Go look at it. Then look at what she said about him. Then ask yourself who the joke's really on." Marcus did release one statement. 6 words, written on cardboard and taped to the garage door. "I just saw what nobody else did." It went viral in an hour. The auction house sent a team of 4 authenticators. They spent 2 days examining the car, testing the paint composition, cross-referencing the serial number against Voss Bellamy's sealed factory archive. On the second evening, the lead authenticator, Dr. Tanada Okafor, sat across from Marcus in Dale's kitchen and said, "Mr. Webb, this vehicle is authentic. It is chassis 2 of 3. Based on the restoration condition and historical significance, our preliminary valuation is $22 million. Marcus stared at her, then at Dale, then at the wall behind her. "Say that again." $22 million. Dale sat down, missed the chair, hit the floor. Neither of them laughed. 3,000 miles away, in the penthouse office of Callaway Holdings, Vanessa saw the Bloomberg headline on her second monitor while reviewing quarterly earnings. Fired groundskeeper's junk car valued at $22 million. A champagne flute in her hand slipped and shattered on the glass desk. She read it again. Then she called her lawyer. Vanessa's lawyer was named Bradford Sims, senior partner at a firm that charged $800 an hour and never lost, because they never took cases they couldn't win. He'd handled the Callaway family's legal affairs for a decade. Vanessa called him at 9:40 p.m., the night the headline dropped. "I need that car back." No greeting, no context. "Vanessa, I saw the article. We need to." "I don't care what you saw. That car was my father's property. The groundskeeper had no legal right to." "You gave it to him." Silence. On camera, in front of 200 witnesses, with a signed transfer of title dated 3 weeks after your father's death. I reviewed the estate documents this morning. Your father's will specifically bequeath the vehicle described as the 1957 Vos Bellamy to Marcus Webb. You signed the transfer yourself. But I didn't know what it was. That's not a legal defense. Make it one. Bradford filed a civil suit in Hartford Superior Court, claiming the transfer was made under mutual mistake of fact, that neither party understood the vehicle's true value, and the gift was therefore voidable. It was a stretch. Every first-year law student who read the filing knew it. But Vanessa didn't want a winning argument. She wanted a war. And wars cost money. Money Marcus Webb didn't have. The summons arrived on a Thursday morning. Marcus was under the car adjusting the rear suspension when Dale walked in holding the envelope like a dead animal. "She's suing you," Dale said, "for $22 million. Marcus folded the papers, put them in his back pocket. The same pocket where he used to keep his work rag. "I need a lawyer." Dale had one. Her name was Corinne Ashe, 51. Former public defender turned civil rights attorney, running a 2-person office above a laundromat in New Haven. 20 years representing workers fired without cause, tenants evicted without notice, ordinary people crushed by companies with bottomless legal budgets, a 70% win rate, a voice like a jazz singer, and zero patience for rich people crying about the consequences of their own cruelty. He read Vanessa's filing in 9 minutes. "This is garbage," she said, tossing it on her desk. "Mutual mistake requires both parties to be mistaken." Marcus wasn't mistaken. He knew exactly what that car was. The only person who made a mistake was the woman who threw a $22 million key at a man's feet because she thought it was funny. Marcus sat across from her, hands folded. "Can she win in court?" "No." Corinne leaned forward. "But she's not trying to win in court. She's trying to win in time. Delay. Depose. Drown you in paperwork and pray you run out of money before a judge rules. They don't beat you with the law. They beat you with the bill." "I don't have money for a long fight." Corinne smiled. "You don't need money, Marcus. You have something better." "What?" Her own video. 2 days later, a story ran in a tabloid. Former Callaway groundskeeper accused of stealing parts from late Billionaire's collection. Anonymous source. No evidence, no comment from Marcus. "She's trying to make you look like a thief," Dale said. "I know." "You going to respond?" "No," Marcus said, sanding a door panel. "The car responds for me." But the press kept digging, and they didn't dig where Vanessa expected. The financial reporter pulled the estate's records and found that Vanessa had quietly sold 3 other cars from her father's collection within weeks of his death. A roadster, a sports coupe, a vintage racer. Combined auction value north of $35 million. She'd sold them privately to her ex-boyfriend, a real estate developer named Trent Ashby, for a combined total of $500,000. The headline: Callaway heiress sold father's $35 million car collection to ex-boyfriend for pennies on the dollar. Vanessa's PR team called it routine estate liquidation. No one believed it. The Callaway Holdings board called an emergency meeting, and Marcus Webb kept sanding. Hartford Superior Court, Courtroom 4B, a Tuesday morning in October. Standing room only. Reporters in the back rows, camera crews outside like it was a premiere. The gallery split, suits on Vanessa's side, working people on Marcus's. A retired mechanic from Bridgeport had driven 90 minutes to be there. A group of students from a trade school in New Haven sat in matching t-shirts that read, "I just saw what nobody else did." Marcus sat at the defendant's table in a borrowed navy suit that fit almost right. His shoes were polished but old. If you looked closely, you could see faint traces of motor oil under his fingernails, the kind that doesn't scrub out after 40 years of working with your hands. Corinne Ashe sat beside him. One manila folder on the table. That was it. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat behind a wall of 3 attorneys with briefcases thick enough to stop a bullet. She wore a charcoal suit, hair pulled into a low bun. Composed, polished, except her right hand on the table, trembling, subtle, almost imperceptible. Marcus noticed. Marcus noticed everything. Judge Miriam Castellano presided, 62, silver-haired, known for never wasting time. "Counselor, your motion." Bradford Sims stood, buttoned his jacket. "Your Honor, the vehicle in question was transferred from the Callaway estate to Mr. Webb under a fundamental misapprehension of its value. Ms. Callaway believed the vehicle to be a derelict, functionally worthless automobile. It could not have consented to gifting an asset worth $22 million. Transfer should be voided under the doctrine of mutual mistake." Judge Castellano turned to Corinne. Response. Corinne stood, didn't adjust anything. Your Honor, I'd like to play a video. Bradford's head snapped up. Objection. We haven't been. It's publicly available on Ms. Calloway's own social media account, Corinne said, posted by the plaintiff herself. Exhibit A. Play it, said the judge. The courtroom screen flickered to life. 200 people on a sunlit terrace. Vanessa, champagne in hand, smiling at the camera. Daddy loved you so much. Here's his parting gift, a rusted piece of junk for his favorite garage rat. Your severance, sweetheart. Now get off my property. Laughter. 200 voices. The courtroom was silent. One of the trade school students pressed his fist against his mouth and stared at the floor. Corinne let the silence sit for 5 seconds. Your Honor, Ms. Calloway did not make a mistake. She made a choice. She chose to humiliate a man who had served her family for 22 years. She chose to call him sweetheart the way you'd call a dog. She chose to throw a car key at his feet in front of 200 people and film it for entertainment. She opened her folder, one sheet of paper. This is a text message Miss Calloway sent to Trent Ashby the night of the party. I quote, "Gave the old yard help Daddy's rust bucket. You should have seen his face. Funniest thing I've done all year." End quote. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Vanessa's face went white. There's no mutual mistake here, Corinne continued. There was a woman who despised a man for the color of his skin and the calluses on his hands. She didn't give him that car by accident. She gave it to him as a weapon, designed to wound, to belittle, to erase 22 years of loyalty in 60 seconds of laughter. She looked directly at Vanessa. The only mistake Miss Calloway made was assuming Marcus Webb was as ignorant as she wanted him to be. As she sat down, Judge Castellano looked at Bradford. Anything further? No, Your Honor. Then I've heard enough. Judge Castellano removed her glasses. The doctrine of mutual mistake requires both parties to share the same misunderstanding. Webb clearly understood the vehicle's nature and value. The gift was voluntary. The documentation is valid. The video posted by the plaintiff herself demonstrates clear intent to transfer ownership. She paused. Motion denied. The vehicle belongs to Mr. Webb. Case dismissed. The gavel came down like thunder. The gallery erupted. The trade school students were on their feet. Ilose was crying for the second time in 3 months, and didn't care who saw it. Outside the courthouse, a wall of microphones waited. Someone shouted, "Marcus, what do you want to say to Vanessa Calloway?" He thought for a long moment. My grandfather taught me to see value where other people see junk. Cars, people, didn't matter. He said everything has a story underneath, if you're patient enough to scrape off the dirt. He paused. I don't have anything to say to Ms. Calloway. The car already said it for me. 2 weeks later, the Calloway Holdings board voted 7-2 to remove Vanessa as CEO. She hadn't stepped down. She'd been pushed. And the video she'd filmed as a joke had, by then, been viewed 90 million times. The auction took place on a Saturday evening in December, at a major collector car house in Monterey, California. Marcus Webb had never been to California. He'd never been inside an auction house. He'd never worn a suit that actually fit him until Corinne handed him a garment bag the morning of the flight and said, "You're about to sell a $22 million car. You're not doing it in work boots." The room was packed. 200 collectors, dealers, museum reps, journalists. A different kind of 200 than the one on Vanessa's terrace. But Marcus noticed the symmetry. Same number. Different ending. The Silver Falcon sat on a raised platform under soft white light. Every curve, every crease, every molecule of paint Marcus had mixed by hand in a coffee can in Dale's garage caught the light and held it like a whisper. Bidding started at 9 million. It passed 13 in 90 seconds, 18 in 3 minutes. The room was electric. 20 million. 21. 22. Marcus sat in the front row next to Dale. Neither of them moved. 23 million. 23-2. The gavel fell. $23.2 million. Dale grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus grabbed his back. They held on to each other like two men standing in a current. And for a long moment, neither of them let go. Marcus didn't buy a house, didn't buy a boat, didn't disappear to an island. He went back to Connecticut. 6 months after the auction, a building opened on Sycamore Street in New Haven, 2 miles from Dale's garage. The sign above the door was hand-painted, the same way Silas Webb had painted his sign in Gary 70 years earlier. Silas Webb Automotive Academy. Classic restoration program. Tuition free. Marcus funded the entire thing. Every cent came from the car. He hired 4 instructors, 3 master mechanics and 1 metallurgist from a state university who'd been looking for a reason to get her hands dirty. The curriculum was Silas's ledger, expanded into a 12-month program covering engine rebuilding, bodywork, paint chemistry, upholstery, and automotive history. The first class had 20 students. Most were Black and Latino. Most were under 25. None had college degrees. All of them had been told, at some point, that they weren't smart enough, valuable enough, or worth the investment. Marcus stood in front of them on the first day, wearing a flannel shirt, work boots, and the same watch his grandfather had given him decades earlier. His hands were clean for once. He'd scrubbed them that morning, but the oil stains were still there, permanent as tattoos. "Nobody in this room is junk," he said. "Nobody. I don't care what anybody told you. I don't care what school you went to or didn't go to. I don't care what your record says or what your family looks like." He held up Silas's ledger, worn, held together with a rubber band. "Everything I know is in here. A man who never finished high school wrote it, and it turned a pile of rust into $23 million. Who set it on the table. I'm not here to make you rich. I'm here to teach you to see what other people throw away." In the hallway outside the workshop, Marcus hung 2 photographs. On the left, a black and white picture of Silas Webb standing in his Gary garage in 1965, wrench in hand, grinning. On the right, color photograph of Weston Calloway in his Connecticut barn in 2019, bourbon in hand, smiling, underneath a small brass plaque. "For the 2 men who saw me before anyone else did. What would you have done if someone threw a rusted key at your feet and told you it was all you deserved? That's not revenge. That's not revenge. That's not money. It's a man who refused to let the worst thing that ever happened to him define who he became."